Shareholder Primacy from Free Float Media, a podcast about activist investing, securities law, and all the ways the financial and legal worlds intersect and collide in mostly real life. Ann and I are back again today for you, for our followers here. Ann, of course, is a law professor at the University of Colorado who teaches and researches securities and business law. She holds up the legal end of this podcast.
And that's Mike Levin, an activist investor who lives and works in Chicago. He covers the financial side of our podcast.
All right, I make an effort. Anyway, so how you doing, Ann? You doing great?
I'm doing fine.
Oh, good. So we're kind of busy here, but I thought we would maybe talk about that a little bit. So,
and I guess before we get started, once again, a reminder that for anyone who wants to talk to us, you can email us at shareholderprimacy@freefloat.llc.
Yes, that is our email box, and we welcome your comments and critique and suggestions. So anyway,
yeah.
Shoot.
So today, I guess the topic for today is me basically asking you, what do you do? I mean, I get you're an activist, but like, what does that exactly entail? What do you do? How do you go about your activist stuff? Like, what does it involve?
Right. Like, you mean overall or like
matter.
This month?
Well, I'm happy to know what you're working on. If you can, whatever you can reveal. I assume some of it you can't, but
Right.
but just sort of, how do you go about doing what you do? And if there's anything in particular you're working on that you can share,
Yes. Unfortunately, the one thing that I could share was disclosed last week. I'm on a new board of a highly troubled company called Charles & Colvard. We can talk about that in another podcast because there's a lot of work to do. The 8K on that was filed last Friday.
Well, that's awesome.
Ticker CTHR in case anybody cares. But again, you're not the first to kind of ask this question. Actually, there's kind of two questions that activists get, or at least activists who kind of put themselves out there, like I guess me, to talk about what we do. The first question, which we've talked about in a previous episode, was boards ask this all the time. Why me? What did I do?
What did I do to deserve this?
To end up in the on the spreadsheet of an activist and so forth. And so there's all sorts of stuff you can discuss about, what about a company makes them more or less susceptible to activist work. That's not what we want to talk about today. It was more like, what are some of the nuts and bolts? What's sort of the work that gets done? And it was kind of interesting because this, for a lot of people, particularly in the investing world, other than cleaning up a whole lot of year-end stuff, everybody's starting to think about vacations or bonuses and all that kind of stuff. But activists are actually kind of busy right around now. So that was something that would be worth talking about, at least in a little bit of detail. Some of the tasks, some of the way to think about the process of doing activism. Is that sort of what you were?
Yeah, absolutely. How do you go about? Yes.
All right. I'll begin by sort of stating a very possibly overly generalized rule of thumb that the work of an activist, the time horizon, generally takes 3 years. It's a very long period of time in the life of any kind of investment. And it's because of some of the unique aspects of what we do, but it's a 3-year process. The first year is spent on planning and analysis and possibly accumulating some shares in a position. And there's a whole lot of work that goes on for a year before anybody really knows it. Sometimes a lot longer, but call it a year. Okay. The next year, there's another year that's spent on the kind of the activism itself, that the actual more public type or public facing type work of doing some filings, talking to the company, talking to other shareholders. We're going to talk about all that. Okay. And then the third year or more is when you start to see results. So after those first 2 1-year terms, you're maybe on the board, or you're starting to monitor the company, or you have a settlement in place that you're trying to kind of manage. So we're talking in terms of at least a 3-year kind of time frame, and that frequently is not well understood. That anytime, going back to the first question I said what I was going to talk about why me, when a company encounters an activist in their stock, it very rarely happened like overnight. It's usually because there's been a lot of careful analysis of the financials, of the business, of the governance, which, like I said, is sort of involves that kind of first year. Okay.
Okay.
So then the question gets to, like, what are we kind of doing, like, now? This month, while everyone else is thinking about their bonus or thinking about their holiday. And so there's a lot of things that are happening right now in most activist shops. It's worth noting what's not going on right now, which is all that analysis, that's largely done. There's been a huge amount of work in the year, call it, up till now, of getting financials, spreading them out, trying to figure out what the business looks like, doing a whole lot of intelligence gathering. There's actually a lot of activists use a lot of expert networks to try to understand a company, try to understand an industry. All right, where we're just talking to just everyone who'll talk to us about what's going on. Talk to former employees, talk to former directors, founders, competitors, customers, suppliers, all that kind of stuff. So there's a whole lot of work that goes into this. And this would remind some people of what a thorough kind of equity analyst might have done at one point before they got overloaded in trying to understand how to analyze a company. All that has kind of happened by now. There's some updates and so forth, but yeah. All right, go ahead. Yeah.
No, what I was going to ask is, like, it seems like you're talking about this as a time of year thing, and that to me suggests, like, is all in anticipation of next proxy-ish season for most companies. I mean,
yes.
Why? It's because Saint Nick is arriving. I mean, what's
right?
What
this is Christmas is not good to us.
So the idea here is that everything is around. So I gather what I'm taking from this to some extent is that if we assume a sort of typical annual shareholder meeting is in the April-June-ish time frame, then this is the time frame you have to work on. And if their annual meeting was in December, you would be working on a different time frame.
Absolutely. Or if you have a June fiscal year end. Yeah. Okay. And the shareholder meeting is going to be in like November or October.
Right.
Yeah. All this, the calendar changes. Right. Yeah.
Right. So the reason you're saying this time of year is because you're assuming the traditional-ish calendar where the fiscal year ends at the end of the calendar year, and then there's a annual meeting in a few months after that.
Right. You're usually right around the so-called proxy season. That's a very good point. Right.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I was clear on that. So now at this time of year, assuming a typical company working on that typical kind of schedule, you've done all of this really careful analysis. You're in the stock, right? You're already in the stock.
Yeah. And maybe like trading around a little bit, maybe building a position. A lot of folks try to remain under 5% because of 13D filings and so forth. So maybe a block becomes available, and you're thinking, oh, maybe, is it going to kill us if we disclose it or something? So there is some position management going on here.
Okay.
But not a ton.
Okay.
There could be position management where we're deliberately, hovering right under 5%, and we're looking forward to going right over 5% because that's going to trigger some disclosure. So, maybe we've targeted sometime in December to buy the next block that we need to do that or something.
Okay.
So,
okay.
So yeah.
And so you've done this. So you've done all the analysis, and then now what are you doing at this time of year then?
So we have also not only analyzed the company, but we've generally by now put together a plan for the activism, sort of saying, here's the steps that we're going to take. And some folks, for some folks, the plan is a big 3-ring binder with tabs. For a lot, it's a couple pages of outline of kind of the steps we want to take. Okay. And so it could include, some thoughts about the board of directors, some thought about the business what we want to change about the business. So there's a whole lot of planning that's largely been. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask, when you say it's planning, do you mean a plan for what you think would improve matters, or do you mean a plan for a strategy for persuading the board to do what it is that you want them to do? Because those are two different kinds of plans.
More the latter.
Okay, so you've got the analysis, and you also have your this is how you fix it.
Right. Yeah. Right. And importantly, here's some governance stuff around fixing it, and why governance is an obstacle to fixing it. So here we want to pressure the board in various ways to do different things. So it's, again, it's more of the plan for the activism rather than plan for the business.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
So hopefully that consistent with what you're asking. So we've largely finalized the business plans for sure, and then the activism plan we'd kind of thought about, but we're kind of tightening it up based on what we heard from other investors or what's happening in the marketplace for the company and so forth. So, but there's an activism plan that most good investors have put together, and that's what we're looking at. Yeah.
So this time of year, you've done your analysis, and you've pretty much got the business plan in place,
right?
And your activism plan, you've got it in mind, but maybe you're still
we're starting to put it together and finalize.
You're starting to put that together, okay?
And that could include, like, the activism plan could be the specific steps. When are we going to do these filings? When are we going to do a books and records demand? When are we going to reach out to the board? What's the budget for this kind of thing under different scenarios? Who do we want to retain to be a proxy solicitor or PR firm? Okay. It could include dimensions of a potential settlement. What are our asks? What are our fantasies? What do we really want to get out of this kind of thing? So all that, again, depending on the fund, can go into that kind of activism plan. What do we expect a proxy contest to look like? What are the themes of a proxy contest? Which directors are soft in various ways, incumbents, I mean, and, what are we expecting to criticize? Someone really long tenured, someone really kind of asleep, somebody, whatever.
Right.
So all that's gone into this planning. And so at this time of year, we're kind of tightening that up. Okay. One important dimension of that plan that's become much more relevant now after 3 years of universal proxy is how many directors in a proxy contest, how many directors do we want to target for replacement or defeat in an election?
Now, would you, how much, it sounds to me, and in my knowing very little, it sounds to me that in these kinds of scenarios, a staggered board isn't that much of a barrier because you're not trying to take over the whole company anyway.
Right.
Would that be right? Like a staggered board.
That's largely accurate.
It may mean that you can't target your particular director who you hate the most, but you can still get a couple.
Yeah, we can still make progress. The reason classified boards are such a sticking point and such an irritant is because, first, it's like a willful entrenchment thing. Okay. It's just
offensive.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It bothers us. But second, that 3-year period I talked about, you add a year for every class.
Well, if you want to
start getting substantial change, exactly.
Right. But since my understanding is a lot of activism can be pretty powerful from a 1C2P.
Oh, sure.
Position.
Yeah. You could start getting companies to start changing some really important stuff just through, 1 or 2 board seats.
Not because of the sheer power of your vote, but because of what that says about what the shareholders want. And
yes,
boards
exactly. That's a great point to bring up, because we'll get to that in a second. But a whole lot of work right now revolves around outreach to other shareholders. Okay. But I'll get to that in a sec. So a couple other things that are going on here. We've already kind of read the bylaws and start to do, lots of corp gov analysis. So people right now, and I'm working on one of these now, is you're starting to draft bylaw amendments at this point and talk to lawyers about what that should look like. We're also starting to monitor.
What kind of bylaws are you?
Oh, sure. If you want to add to a proxy contest, maybe the need to change the bylaw for written consent or for special meetings. It's another way to add pressure on a company. Gives us more to work with in a negotiation too. So if we do like a menu of bylaw amendments,
And maybe one of them will be like, I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
specifically like what kind would be pressure. Obviously, ability of shareholders to call a meeting, ability to act by written consent, things like
yeah,
that.
those are or like stuff around poison pill things.
Oh,
Again, none of these
shareholder vote required for.
Yeah,
Yeah,
none
these
of
are
these are going
pressure
to be
points.
really a huge threat. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so they're not a huge threat, but they're like pressure points and asks.
Yes, exactly. So you do some of these, and those are starting to get drafted and put together. We're also starting to monitor our deadlines because, again, part of that plan is a whole calendar. We know that there's this 30-day window to submit these nominations, or this is when when the earnings call is expected. And so we're going to be monitoring the whole calendar right now, and finalizing that. And again, that starts to really take shape. Again, more really in January. Some of the notices have started to open up now, but that's for most companies that have the standard, roughly 90-day notice period. It's really after the first of the year. Couple other things that are going on. We're recruiting director candidates. So if and we don't necessarily want to have like a full-blown proxy fight in mind, planned in that whole planning, but we're starting to talk to them. Some people have started to retain recruiters. I know a couple that are getting kind of busy now. Executive search firms that work for some of the bigger funds. Otherwise, you're just, talking to friends of yours, talking to other shareholders, talk about that in a minute, and trying to figure out, now that, for a board, now that we're looking for 3 candidates, for instance, which 3? I'm long an advocate of the investor, the portfolio manager being one of the candidates, but sometimes, if you need more than one, you can start to reach out to networks and so forth. Starting to but drafting books and records demands is starting to take shape right now. And again, most books and records demands, or many, are fairly straightforward because they're really only for shareholder information. Frequently, we'll chunk in some other stuff about board minutes or other types of deliberations and so forth.
Yes.
But,
So do the changes to Delaware law inhibit you? I mean, I know they definitely inhibit plaintiffs' firms for like
Right.
lawsuits, especially like Caremark lawsuits, that kind of thing. Do they what they limit are informal materials that aren't the official board
Right.
books and so forth. Does that affect you very much?
Not dramatically. It could, depending on the situation. If there's something where we really are, interested in trying to uncover some conflicts at a board, we may want to. We may be disappointed now that we can't get correspondence about this kind of thing.
Okay, but you can get the director questionnaires, right?
Yeah, we can get
So you
director questionnaire, we can get official minutes, we can get board presentations, but importantly, this is around shareholder lists.
Right,
We want to get registered lists, NOBO lists. We want to get all that.
right.
And so,
So that
and
you
so
can-
predominant books and records demands among activists, at least right now, are for that kind of shareholder information, which leads us to the main huge activity that's frequently underrated is contacting other shareholders and starting to feel them out about how much change they want in a company.
So you're getting. Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure. So you're
Yeah.
getting the shareholder list, and you really can get information. I mean, just because I kind of assume so many may not have their name available, because, but apparently you get enough that you can really contact.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Okay.
sure, we can get a bunch of shareholder information from 13F filings and from other
right.
disclosures, but requesting the NOBO list, which we could probably spend a whole episode talking about, non-objecting beneficial owner
Yeah,
list.
yeah.
And so forth.
So right, I just didn't know how many are objecting versus.
Oh,
I have no sense.
you can get a large number of really interesting shareholders
Okay.
that are not in a disclosure position, that are not in a big fund. It could be a hedge fund that's got some position. You've got some founder. There's all sorts of
that's
information you get from a NOBO list.
Okay.
So submitting those books and records demands right now is, or at least preparing them, helps us to kind of contact other shareholders, which is a huge part of this. With my 3%, I think I've talked about this before. My 3%, I'm not going to get very far. I'll get a call back and maybe some meetings. But, at no point does the board say with that kind of shareholding, oh, man,
Right.
you're just a genius, Mike. We're going to do, why didn't we think of this before?
Right.
However, if I can say to that board, I am confident that another 25% of the shares agrees with me, that totally sets up a whole different setting for the activism. So, but you're not going to know that until you start reaching out to these folks.
Right.
And that's what kind of November and December and maybe January are kind of for. And some of the larger institutions and so forth, they're not going to take our call until, something big is going on. Until it's a proxy contest and so forth. You're not going to get to the big three unless there's something for them to start to vote on. But there's a whole range of other shareholders that usually are happy to talk to you. I mean, we have a conversation about what's going on with the stock and what do they think of the board and what's going on in the industry and so forth. Okay. And those are very constructive conversations that help build trust, help, test our thesis for the company, see if other shareholders agree with, in fact, what we want to do with the business, and then set us up for kind of discussions with the company at some point. So that's kind of what I've been working on, that kind of stuff. You're
preparing the requests. You've already put them in and talking to shareholders.
A request for the books and records demands. Some of them have gone in already, but others may next month. I mean, part of the problem. Go ahead.
I mean, if you haven't filed a 13D, is that really the first actual? The board now knows you're there because you've requested the shareholder list.
There's actually two moments when the board will, and again, any board that's surprised by this is delusional. Okay,
well, they should just be able to tell because they know that they're underperforming.
Yeah, they just know that their stock isn't doing well, and there's and maybe they've seen an activist that's filed a G. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they're over 5% that way, or maybe they only got 3%, but and they just haven't been able to figure it out. So there's two moments when this happens. First is when we kind of submit a books and records demand, and again, we've probably been in touch with the company over a period of quarters.
Okay.
Because maybe we'll want to talk to the CFO about something, or we'll have a question after a call. So they kind of know we're there.
Okay.
But the demonstration of activist intent that isn't required to be filed is either filing a books and records demand or converting shares from street name to record name.
Oh.
Again, most everybody.
Those are the big clues.
Yes. Most everybody owns. They own their shares to their prime broker. Nobody owns shares. And I mean, it's hard to trade otherwise.
Right.
But once you take 100 or 1,000 shares and put them in record name, usually that's a clue that you're going to want to serve some sort of formal notice to the company about something.
Right.
Okay. So that's the other tip off. And again, good companies know all this. They're already monitoring the record list. Some of them do it daily. And of course, they're going to know when they get a books and records demand.
Okay.
So, anyway, so that's what's going on. So we're kind of getting ready for next month,
ready
and
for
the month
stuff
after
next,
that.
well,
Getting ready to send notices out and so forth, and preparing for this.
Well, once that stuff becomes public, I look forward to seeing what you're doing.
Well, yeah, there's like I said, there's at least a couple others I'm working on. It may or may not. I mean, most of what I do never becomes public
because once they know that you're there and they know you have shareholder support, you're able to negotiate some kind of settlement.
Right, or they're resisting anything we want to do, and we decided it's not worth it to pursue it any harder. Okay. That happens too.
Yeah.
So, but there's a whole nother group of activists that are at work right now that we should probably talk about, and these are the ESG folks. Who are also busy at this time of year, but they're busy on some other stuff. So why don't we take a quick break and return to them in a minute, shall we?
Okay.
Well, let's do that here at Shareholder Primacy.
Shareholder Primacy is brought to you by FreeFlowAnalytics.com, the only free database of corporate directors, their influence, and their performance. If you own a stock or retirement plan, go to FreeFlowAnalytics.com and look up which of your elected directors are performing well and which aren't. Use your vote in the alternative democracy and get your data at FreeFlowAnalytics.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Shareholder Primacy. I'm Ann Lipton here with Mike Levin, and we're continuing to look at what activists are up to, but we're now leaving aside the financial activists, what I call big A activism, and we're looking at what I call little a activism.
I love it.
Sort of I don't want to say financial, non-financial, because a lot of ESG people would say this is financial, but like, big A and little a. So what are the little a ESG-ish
Well,
activists
I
up
think
to?
the very short answer is this: at this moment in December of 2025, they are very worried and possibly panicked. Because their activism pertains almost entirely, not exclusively, to shareholder proposals. And there's a lot of discussion. I don't want to diminish the amount of interaction that a lot of these activists have with a portfolio with a company. There's meetings, there's discussions, and so on and so forth. But those inevitably lead to either a decision to not file a proposal, a 14A8 proposal. You see where we're going with this. Or to file a 14A proposal, refine a proposal on some subject where an activist has been having a dialogue with a company. Okay? And as I said, for various reasons that we've talked about a little bit before, but we can sort of update here, those activists are in a bad mood. So, and the reason, of course, is because the SEC is looking like going to make it a lot harder for them to do their work. And you and I have both seen the same stuff. But let's talk in the same. Oh, go ahead. You were going to ask a question.
Oh no, I just had a question.
Yeah.
I feel, I know there's been empirical work on this, but I don't recall where I saw a glimpse of it once. So I'll just ask from your point of view. I always wondered, like, obviously you don't do ESG activism, and you've said you don't like shareholder proposals or non-binding, all that. But
I'm not a fan of precatory ones.
Yes,
right. Okay.
But
go ahead.
but still, and even today, and even a couple of years ago, like some of them became more successful. But fill out the report on emissions, diversity report, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or even sometimes the governance stuff, separate chair and CEO. When you see those proposals succeed, which is still a rarity, even when they became a little bit more common, did that ever was that something you would look at as a big A activist, as something like, this is an indication that shareholders are unhappy, which may make it a target? Is that useful information?
Yes. We will look at the votes that precatory proposals receive. We don't put a tremendous amount of weight on those, but that's something that will go into all that planning we talked about, because we're trying to diagnose shareholder sentiment here. And in the same vein, we look pretty carefully at say on pay vote results.
Right.
Okay.
Because that was always my sense, that like, even if like the precatory proposals are a signal of unrest, which and that can be useful, even if it's, you don't think it's not that you care about the diversity thing or the whatever else it is, but it signals a shareholder unrest.
Right. And we'll look more carefully at those votes and sort of see if certain hedge funds or certain other, outside the massive indexers, because they usually tend to vote on the precatory stuff per policy. But if there's some big hedge fund that, in fact did vote, and we could, look up at a Forum MPX and sort of see, and we'll say, hey, you voted for this proposal, this governance proposal. That's interesting. What are you thinking? So those are a legitimate way to try to assess shareholder sentiment. So I don't, like I said, it's nothing that I think is a way to help change a company, but as long as the information's there, I'll avail myself of it.
Got it.
So does that, I think that sort of addresses what the kind of the thinking.
That was exactly my question.
Goes into. Yes, exactly. So anyway, so all these activists that are doing this, they've spent, their summer and their fall planning this stuff, looking at which companies they want to meet with and who they're targeting and so forth. Looking at how the votes went last year and so forth. And so they're doing a whole lot of planning the same way that kind of, I like big A or financial activists have kind of addressed this. They've had some meetings with some companies. Again, that's not happening as much as they'd like. They've also drafted their proposals. And again, the proposal drafting there is pretty straightforward. because a lot of the activists use, the similar proposal from company to company. They've documented their ownership. That's always a big thing, and we'll actually talk about that in a minute. And most of those proposals have been submitted now. The deadlines for submitting 14A proposals tend to be a little earlier. It's either 120 to 150 days before a meeting date or anniversary of the meeting date. And so those proposers, those proponents were kind of sitting around waiting for the inevitable SEC no action dance, where SEC will issue a no action letter, or they'll get the request for no action from the company, and then they do their response, and then there's some back and forth, and that whole process has been totally upended and disrupted. And so that's what I was kind of hoping to bring out again here.
So that process has been disrupted.
Yes. And I had thought that the disruption, just a few weeks ago, I had asserted, I actually wrote a post on this, I thought the disruption was going to be kind of minor.
Oh, no.
I was under the impression that companies wouldn't, now that they didn't have the cover of official SEC no action relief, they would maybe, and it's looking like I was wrong.
Well, I don't think that's it, but it's sort of complicated. So and by the way, we also got I'm going to shout out that we got a mailbag asking about these changes.
Oh yeah, right. Oh, that's a good point. We can talk about it another time, but someone asked about this specific thing.
How this changes, what happens, and the pros and cons. So we'll cover like what's going on, and I'll briefly, because we've been going for a while, say what I've been thinking of this. So normally what the SEC does, like previously, is it is legally required that if a company wants to exclude a shareholder proposal, it has to actually notify the shareholder and notify the SEC, I'm excluding a shareholder proposal on this basis. And at that point, the SEC sort of had a practice of saying, we agree with you, which would basically mean that the SEC would not sue you if you took that step. The shareholder could sue you.
Not pursue enforcement.
Not pursue an enforcement action. The shareholder could still sue you, and very rarely did. But the SEC was essentially say, we're not going to sue you. Or the SEC would say, actually, we think you're wrong. And almost certainly if the SEC said, actually, we think you're wrong, you must include it, companies would let it drop.
They would just give up right there.
They would give up. They would include the proposal, because otherwise they might very well find themselves in a fight with the SEC. So that was how things worked up until now. What has happened is that the chair of the SEC, Paul Atkins, has basically decided that Delaware law may prohibit shareholders from offering precatory proposals, which is something that you talked about with Kyle Pinder. So he has decided that it may be the case that precatory proposals are simply prohibited under Delaware law. Right. And ostensibly because of this, but he's changed the system. Now, if you want to submit a no action, if you want to exclude a shareholder proposal on the ground that it is not a proper subject for shareholder action, which as a practical matter means on the ground that it's precatory and therefore prohibited under Delaware law, the SEC will continue to take a position on that. Like, it'll get to weigh in and say, yes, my God, you're exactly right. We've always thought that precatory proposals were illegal, or they might actually go to Delaware and ask. But if you seek to exclude the proposal on any other ground, then there are two paths. One is that the SEC simply won't say anything. And the other, so you just have to make your own call. You say that you're going to exclude it on such and such ground. The SEC says absolutely nothing. And then you just roll the dice. Or you go to the SEC and you say, I have a really solid legal basis, like
really solid, really solid,
with some kind of deep lawyering as to why you certify that you think you're correct, that you can exclude it. At which point the SEC will essentially say, on the basis solely of your certification, with no independent research of our own, we promise not to take action against you.
Right.
Okay, so a couple things about this. First, if it's not proper subject for shareholder action, which is the one that they're preserving, they're going to, basically the one they're going to fight about
Delaware to get some
Yeah.
further work
What
on. Yeah.
what kinds of basis for exclusion are we talking about? Very often, claims that the shareholder did not meet the formal requirements to submit a proposal. They haven't proved that they hold enough shares. They they didn't get it in on time, something
Right.
like that.
Right,
And then
right.
also things like I saw one that was substantially implemented. That's a basis for exclusion. We already did this thing,
Right.
or it's ordinary business. This is just not. This is just
Right.
day-to-day stuff. And
You're trying to tell us to what color the CEO's carpeting should be.
Exactly.
Right,
You're
right.
micromanaging the company. Those are independent bases for exclusion. And those are the kinds of things that the SEC is taking this dual path. Either they won't say anything, or if you just paper it, they'll say, on the basis of your certification, we promise not to take
Paper
action.
it. That's the verb I was looking for.
Yeah, if you
Yes,
paper it.
okay.
So here's my view of that. First, I don't actually see a distinction between those two paths, because legally, what the SEC is saying is if you take the paper path, it's promising not to sue you if you exclude the proposal. But
Right.
if you don't take the paper path, it's simply saying nothing, which means the distinction between these two paths is if you don't submit the full attorney certification, you're risking the SEC suing you. Except I don't think that's a risk. They're not going to sue you. They hate shareholder proposals, and they're just
Right.
not. So I don't actually think that there is a distinction between those two paths,
Right.
which
Okay.
means if a company chooses not to exclude a shareholder proposal, either with all the papering or not, the only actual legal risk that they are going to endure is that the shareholder themselves sue and say, you improperly excluded our proposal.
Right.
I don't see as a practical matter
That's not happening.
well, it's
Right.
very rare. There are some
Right.
shareholders, though, that are well-heeled, and like the institutions, like the pension funds that like
some
doing this
biggies
stuff.
may decide to
And
litigate
they
this,
might,
but
because
yeah.
actually they're looking for a fight. So they might sue, and companies know that. But here's the thing. The worst case scenario, if somebody sues, the absolute worst case scenario from the company's perspective is they say, oh, you're right, we will settle and we'll include it, which is not a penalty. Like there's no real legal risk that
Right.
I see from the company. They could just exclude
Yeah,
everything.
there's no
wait-
fines and penalties for this. All they're
there's no
saying
fine.
is you're
No,
going
they
to
could just
litigate it.
exclude
Right.
everything. If a shareholder sues them, say, whoops, you're right, and include it and moot the action. So I don't see a real legal risk here.
Yes.
But they probably, as my understanding, do not actually want to pick a fight with the larger shareholders. They don't want to get into it with the big pension funds
With
that have
CalPERS or with the New York Fund or
exactly.
whatever. Yeah,
So
right.
those they'll probably, unless they have a really good basis for exclusion, and they probably don't, because those are professional enough that if they're submitting a proposal, they will be doing a proper kind. They're not
Right.
going to want to get into a fight with those guys, so they'll just include those. And then, though, what that means is the ones who they think don't have the wherewithal to really fight, those are the ones that they can exclude, I think, with very little legal or reputational risk, unless they're afraid maybe smaller shareholders will
Like
send out
rally
an
around or
SOS to
something
the
like
bigger
that.
to the bigger
No,
ones or
no.
something like that. But but so I think companies are in very little legal risk. Their reputational risk may very well be just about managing the big shareholders, and that means we're excluding the proposals of the smaller shareholders. And whether you care about that kind of depends on where you sit. Historically, It was always viewed, like courts viewed 14A8 as like a way for even small, normal, little ordinary retail shareholders to have their say.
Right.
Whether you view that as a value is a separate question.
It's different question.
Yeah.
So we already have some evidence of this, because there are already 6, as I have started to think about them, no objection, not no action, but 6 no objection letters.
Ones where they
that
papered it and the SEC said we're not going to take
yes.
action.
Yes.
Right.
So
And a lot of
let me-
those.
yeah.
No, sorry. Yeah. But as I said, of those 6, some of those are really the technical stuff.
Well,
that's
we
easy.
can summarize those
Yeah.
6.
Okay.
So first, the 6 were all proposals that had been in the no action hopper before this.
Right.
Okay, so the company just sort of resubmitted or wrote a supplemental letter and said we would like to get no action, no objection relief based on this earlier no action. So all the legal arguments for excluding them had already been laid out.
Mm-hmm.
in the
but
no action.
But not with this super special. Oh, but these are the ones with the super special certificate, like enough certification that it counts. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So all 6 were from John Chevedden. So there were 6 corporate governance proposals, and talk about a small individual shareholder who's really unlikely to sue anybody over this.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
No, he's not. I know.
Okay.
All right, I highly doubt it. So, of those 6, 4 of them kind of surprised me. 3 were requested no objection just based on share ownership, not hitting the 2,000 or 10,000
because that kind of thing is really easy. Like
it's very
as a lawyer, it's very easy. They have it or they don't have it. We're done.
Right, it's so those 3 there. Another was because it was a late submission. It was submitted 4 days after the deadline.
Right. Again.
And those 4 candidly surprised me a little, but John's really good as a general rule. So the 2 others were interesting. You refer to this. The 2 others were based on substantial implementation.
Right.
Which is, again, a standard objection or exclusion where a company could say, we've already done what they've asked. We don't have to do anything more. We've not complete implementation, but substantial implementation. One of them had to do with a very generalized precatory proposal saying, we think there should be straight majority voting on anything that shareholders vote on, instead of supermajorities, and that could be for special meetings, for bylaw amendments, all kind of stuff. And the company said, "Well, if you read our bylaws, that's really what we have." So you could kind of quibble about a couple of them, but so they basically said we've already substantially implemented this idea that we should have straight simple majority voting. The other one was a precatory proposal to declassify a board. And the company was in the very early stages of doing it. They'd taken some votes already. The board wasn't completely declassified, but I think the board, in the SEC's eyes, would have credibly made enough progress here. And they made all the legal arguments that we made enough progress that it was substantial. But again, it may not necessarily matter because, I'm really eager to see kind of how weak the papering process can get before the SEC says, okay, we really need to take a closer look at this. And I'm guessing the SEC is not going to really scrutinize this stuff at all.
The distinction is really between the SEC saying we will not take action or saying nothing. But nothing, I mean, what theoretically that could mean is that the SEC could theoretically take action against you, except that I just don't think that's on the table with this SEC that doesn't like shareholder proposals
SEC is
at
not
all.
going to be enforcing
so there's no difference. So I would think from a company's perspective, why risk it with, by staking out your legal position in detail that can be attacked later? I mean, I don't know.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, so that is what the ESG proponents have been working on. That's what they're up against, and that's what they're thinking about really hard this month, unlike me and some of my guys I work with who are thinking about some other stuff. So anyway, so yeah, 2 kinds of activists, 2 different kinds of settings, 2 things to work on in November, December, and January. Yeah. So I think that was kind of fun. So we should probably wrap it up. What do you say?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. And we have one more episode. We're going to
a special episode, a very special episode
for this month, and it's going to be a real special one. We'll sort of announce a little later. And then we're going to take a break for the rest of the month and go enjoy the holidays. So that's it. This is Shareholder Primacy, hosted by Ann Lipton and me, Mike Levin. I'm an independent activist investor and advisor to investors about their activist situations. Ann is professor of law and the Lawrence W. Demuth Chair of Business Law at the University of Colorado Law School. You can find me, Mike, at theactivistinvestor.com and Ann at law.colorado.edu. Our podcast is produced and distributed by Free Float Media. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again soon.